What happens when you get fired, but you're the only person holding the company together, and you're replaced by someone with little experience? Well, I'll tell you exactly what happens. 3 weeks later, the investors are gone, the numbers are gone, and the CEO is crying on a live call. And me? I'm sitting on my porch, sipping coffee, and that's my story now. My name is Rachel Myles. I am 38 years old, originally from Charleston, South Carolina, and after spending nearly 16 years climbing my way up in corporate strategy, I now work as an independent consultant for private equity firms who know better than to confuse charisma with competence. But this is not a story about where I ended up. This is a story about how I got pushed out of the company I helped build, replaced by a TikTok famous board member's daughter, and how I watched it all collapse from my front porch, iced coffee in hand, without lifting a single finger to stop it. To really understand what happened, you have to understand me. I am not flashy. I do not care for trendy slogans or thought leadership posts with glittery hashtags. I believe in showing up early, staying late, and knowing the numbers better than the algorithm ever could. At Havenwell & Co., a mid-size wealth management firm based out of Chicago, I was the senior director of strategic operations. 12 years, 4 restructures, 5 CEOs, and not a single missed target. I was the invisible engine that kept that place moving, and I was fine with being invisible, until they brought in Sienna Brooks. Sienna was 25. She wore white boots in February, carried a tiny purse that could not fit a pen, and spoke in sentences that sounded like Instagram captions. She was the daughter of Lance Kwan, a major shareholder and chairman of the board. She had no formal background in finance, no experience managing teams. What she did have was a massive social media following, a certificate in conscious leadership, and an energy that made every room feel like an episode of a reality show. When she walked into her first leadership meeting with a ring light and a personal brand strategist, I knew exactly what was about to happen. But I stayed quiet. I always had. They told me I was being let go in a tone reserved for lost dogs and sympathy cards. "We are transitioning in a fresh direction," HR said, trying not to make eye contact. More innovation, more social engagement, a younger voice. I sat there nodding, as if I had not seen this coming a mile away. The fruit tray on the table, gluten-free of course, was the final insult. HR only brought fruit trays for 2 reasons: onboarding someone very important or firing someone who had become inconvenient. I was the second one, and the person being onboarded? That was Sienna. She had not even finished her orientation before she started asking if she could reimagine my Outlook signature and inject a little more vibe into the investor decks. I did not cry. I did not shout. I packed my things, the ceramic mug I had used every day for a decade, a photo of my former assistant Theo and me at our last team retreat, and a leather binder no one else thought to touch. That binder held 12 years of notes, personal details on every major investor, patterns, preferences, birthdays, losses, and wins. None of it was stored in the cloud. None of it was on their fancy CRM. It was all in my handwriting, cross-referenced and color-coded. As I walked past Sienna's new office, formerly mine, she did not look up. She was too busy filming a boomerang of her green juice, and in that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I walked out without saying goodbye. I had learned long ago that silence is sometimes louder than any parting words. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk under a slate-colored sky and watched as my phone lit up with messages. "Heard what happened," said one. "What is going on over there?" said another. One was just 2 words. "You good?" These were not sympathy texts. These were early warning signals. The nervous system of the company was still firing, even though the brain had been removed. And what they had not yet realized was that I was the brain, or at least the part that kept everything functioning. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the emails trickle in from the outside. A few people wanted help finding documents. A few wanted to talk off the record. I ignored them all. Not because I was angry, but because some systems need to break in order for people to realize what held them together. I did not plan revenge. That is not who I am, but I do believe in consequences, and sometimes the sweetest form of retaliation is doing absolutely nothing while the tower you built crumbles under the weight of someone else's ego. So I sat back, turned my phone face down, and took a long, slow sip of my coffee. Because the storm had only just begun. And this time, I was not in it. I was watching from dry land. I knew something was off the second I stepped into the Zenith Core executive boardroom. The air felt too clean. There was a tray on the far side table covered in perfectly sliced strawberries, gluten-free muffins, and some chia seed creation that looked like it belonged on a wellness blog. Right in the center was a laminated sign that read, "Welcome Sienna," written in soft baby pink script with a tiny heart above the eye. I stood still for a second, just long enough to take it all in. That fruit tray meant only two things in this building. Either someone was getting promoted or someone was getting fired. Judging by the timing, the pastel colors, and the sudden tension behind every fake smile in the room, I knew it was both. I was not just being replaced. I was being erased. And Sienna was being handed the role I had built from nothing. Riley from HR greeted me like we were at a summer barbecue, all cheery tone and empty eyes. "Rachel, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Please have a seat." She gestured to the seat across from the tray like I had a choice. I did not sit right away. I scanned the room. No one else made eye contact. Not Devin from finance, not Olivia from the board, and definitely not Lance Kwan, the chairman who had always treated me like a background app, necessary but silent. "We just want to share some exciting changes today," Riley continued, voice steady like she had been rehearsing in the mirror since dawn. Zenith Core is entering a new chapter, a fresh perspective, a modern voice, and after careful thought, the leadership team feels it is time to realign. I raised an eyebrow, waited. She blinked twice, then said the words like she had practiced them 100 times. "We are restructuring toward a fresher leadership voice." There it was, dressed up like a playlist announcement but no less sharp. I was being let go politely, and she was trying to make it sound like a creative pivot. I almost laughed. Riley cleared her throat and added, "You have been instrumental to our growth, Rachel. Your contributions are deeply valued, but we believe the brand must now reflect new energy, especially with the market turning toward digital-first engagement and Gen Z investor alignment." I nodded once, just to let her finish. She was not the decision maker, she was the messenger, and I was not about to argue with someone reading from a script. That was when Sienna walked in, or maybe floated in. She had that kind of energy, carefree and curated. 25, fresh off a mindful marketing certificate, and 3 brand deals with wellness startups. She wore a silk cropped blazer in blush pink and boots that looked more like fashion statements than footwear. She smiled like she had already won. "Hi everyone, I am so grateful to be here. I really feel called to this opportunity," she said, as if she were accepting an award, not stepping over a career. Her voice was smooth and high, sprinkled with words like alignment, synergy, and intention. She turned to me. "Hi Rachel, you must be the legend I keep hearing about." She giggled, then added, "You have totally shaped this role. Big shoes to fill." I said nothing, just gave a half smile and looked down at the tray. There were 3 gluten-free muffins left. One had blueberries arranged in the shape of a smiley face. That felt appropriate. Because this was a performance, a little stage play where I got to be the graceful exit, and she got to be the Instagrammable arrival. I had been in this industry too long not to recognize the signs. They were done with quiet competence. They wanted something shinier, louder, someone who could smile on camera and say thought leadership while blinking slowly into a ring light. That someone was not me. After a few more rehearsed statements and vague promises about helping with transition support, Riley offered to walk me through my severance packet. I declined. I stood up, thanked her, and asked if I could collect my things. No one stopped me. No one offered a handshake. Sienna had already taken my seat. She was tapping something into her phone, probably drafting a caption for her first big girl job post. I walked out of the boardroom with my head held high and one clear thought in my mind. They were about to learn something the hard way. You cannot replace a system with a selfie, and you should never hand the keys to someone who thinks corporate strategy is a Canva template with pastel graphs and affirmations. The fruit tray was sweet, but what came next was not. They gave me 15 minutes. 15 minutes to end a 12-year career, clean out an office I built with both strategy and soul, and walk away from a system I had quietly kept alive through market crashes, leadership shakeups, and internal meltdowns no one outside the top floor ever heard about. I did not argue. I did not cry. I had known this day was coming from the moment I heard the words, fresh leadership energy wrapped in a bow of false gratitude. So I nodded once, then walked back to my office, pulled out an empty box from under my desk, the same box I had used during the 2014 downsizing to help a colleague pack, and started placing my life into it piece by piece. There was the ceramic cactus mug my assistant Theo gave me when I got promoted, the one with a chip on the handle I never fixed because it made the mug feel lived in. My desk cactus, Fred, slightly lopsided and in desperate need of water, but still alive. A photo of my team from the first investor summit we ever hosted in-house. I took that picture during the catering crisis, just before we found out the CEO's favorite meal had been sent to the wrong hotel. We fixed it before anyone noticed. That was what I did. I fixed things quietly, efficiently, without needing credit. Then there was the binder. Worn leather, faded along the spine, with a pen loop that had long lost its elasticity. That binder was never just for notes. It was the true memory bank of the company. Inside were handwritten details about every major client, cross-referenced call logs, birthdays, anniversaries, children's names, allergies, hotel preferences, travel quirks, even a note about one investor's fear of escalators. None of that lived in a spreadsheet. None of it existed in the cloud. It was all there in my own shorthand, in ink smudged from years of coffee steam and last-minute changes. That binder was never backed up. It did not need to be, because I never forgot. I had just placed my nameplate face down in the box when the door opened. Sienna walked in like she owned the building, phone in hand, angled toward her face, capturing what I could only assume was a story about first-day feels. Her voice floated through the air, high and cheerful. "Can I rebrand your email footer?" she asked, not even pretending to look at me. I wanted to say something more authentic, like gratefully creating space for innovation, or maybe just my name in lowercase letters. Thoughts? I stared at her for a moment. Not in anger, not in shock, just in quiet disbelief. I did not answer. I closed the binder, slid it gently into the box, and stood up without a word. As I walked past her toward the side exit, the one I always used when I needed to disappear between meetings, she did not move. She kept recording, probably tagging the company with a sparkle emoji and a quote from someone who never worked a day in operations. I reached for the door. No one tried to stop me. No one followed. And as the soft click of the handle echoed behind me, I let a small smile break across my face. Not a happy smile, not a smug one. Just a calm, steady smile that said, "You have no idea what you just did." They thought they fired a strategist. What they really did was sever the one thread holding their fragile ecosystem together. Because the truth is, I was not just running reports or coordinating deliverables. I was the heartbeat, the living archive, the silent translator between chaos and clarity. And the binder in my arms was not sentimental. It was survival. The company had leaned on that knowledge for years, taken it for granted, and now handed everything over to someone who thought syncing up meant replying with a GIF. Outside, the sun was setting behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the pavement. I paused on the sidewalk, looked up at the glass building where I had spent over a decade giving everything I had, then looked down at my box. It was not heavy, but the weight it carried would soon be felt inside those walls, in missed calls, in botched investor decks, in compliance errors, and in awkward meetings where no one knew what came next. They thought they upgraded the system, but what they really did was unplug the power and hand the wires to someone who thought data lived on vision boards. I turned the corner and kept walking. I did not need a dramatic exit. I had the only thing that mattered: my memory, my principles, and the binder no one ever thought to duplicate. That was not just a box. That was the company's insurance policy, and they had just handed it to the wind. 2 hours after I walked out of Zenith Core with my ceramic mug, my little desk cactus, and that leather binder tucked safely under my arm, my phone started buzzing. It was not a flood, just a few familiar names. The first was a text from Jonah Rice, head of investor relations. "You out? You okay?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then locked the screen without replying. 10 minutes later, another buzz. This one from Devin Krantz, our CFO. "Where do you file the investor priority schedule?" No greeting, no pleasantries, just the question. Because now they needed something only I had ever kept up with. Again, I said nothing. I was sitting on the balcony of my condo, wrapped in a blanket, even though the day was still warm. A tall glass of iced coffee sat next to me, sweating slightly against the coaster. The binder was on the table, untouched. I had not opened it. I had no reason to. Not yet. I just watched the traffic move below and let the city hum around me. I was not angry. I was not sad. What I wanted more than anything was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace. The kind that reveals truth. Silence that settles into the cracks and forces people to see how hollow their foundation really is. That kind of silence is loud, and that is exactly what I intended to give them. Let them sit in their morning meetings looking for the files I never uploaded. Let them search the cloud for the templates I never digitized. Let them wonder why the revenue forecasting model is missing a quarter's worth of updates. They never asked where the work lived. They never understood that I was the structure. They thought systems maintained themselves, that once a process was set, it kept running like a clock. But the truth is, I was the one who wound the gears, reset the dials, and cleaned up the messes no one ever saw. I was the one who reminded Jonah about investor birthdays, who flagged compliance issues before they became legal disasters, who recalculated burn rates when a projection came in too soft. I was not irreplaceable because I wanted to be. I was irreplaceable because they never took the time to learn. And now, Sienna sat in my chair, probably posting a selfie captioned "First Day as Growth Queen" or something just as meaningless, completely unaware that what she inherited was not a role. It was a responsibility. A fragile balance of instinct, knowledge, and context. And she had walked into it with zero tools and too much confidence. A few more messages trickled in over the next hour. One from May in compliance. "Did you ever finish uploading the Q3 variance notes?" One from Riley in HR asking about a team feedback form that never existed to begin with. One from a junior analyst simply asking, "What now?" I did not respond to any of them. I was not being petty. I was being precise. Some collapses do not need help. They just need stillness. Remove one beam and the weight shifts. Remove two and the roof begins to sag. I was not the storm. I was the absence of pressure. And in that absence, they were going to feel every flaw they ignored. By sunset, I had turned my phone face down. The messages had stopped. Maybe they assumed I was taking the day to recover. Maybe they had not yet realized how much of the company lived in my head. I wondered how long it would take before someone tried to recreate my tracking system. Probably not long, but they would not get far, because what I built was not just files and folders. It was logic layered on top of habit, tied together with memory. No AI tool could rebuild that. No intern could guess which file connected to which note or why I marked some entries in green ink and others in red. I looked out at the skyline, sipped my coffee, and finally opened the binder. I did not flip through it. Just looked at the first page. A sticky note in the top right corner read, "Investor call order, emergency only." That list had saved us twice. No one else even knew it existed. I closed the binder again and smiled to myself. This was not revenge. This was justice done in silence. The kind that does not shout, does not gloat. It waits. And when the cracks spread and the ceiling starts to fall, no one blames the missing nail. They blame the one who pulled it. But I did not pull anything. I just stepped away. And now they would learn the difference. By Monday morning, the building was already buzzing with confusion. Emails had gone unanswered all weekend. Reports were sitting in limbo. No one knew who to ask. And that was when Sienna scheduled her first all-hands meeting. The invite subject line read, "Elevate the brand, elevate the soul," followed by 3 sparkle emojis and a dancing cactus gif. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. sharp. Mandatory attendance. No agenda. Just a vague promise of transformative alignment. I was not there, of course, but I heard everything. People talk, especially when they are nervous. The Zoom room filled up slowly. Cameras off, mics muted, just rows of blank faces and profile pictures. Sienna entered the meeting wearing a pearl-colored blazer, hair perfectly curled, and a virtual background of some mountain landscape with a rainbow filter over it. She waved like she was on a live stream. "Hey fam, let's do a vibe check." Her voice was bright, like she was hosting a lifestyle podcast and not leading a financial firm into a new fiscal quarter. A few people blinked. No one responded. Undeterred, she launched her PowerPoint, which opened with a pastel gradient and the phrase, "Be the energy you want to disrupt." The quote was credited to Gandhi. It was, in fact, from a shampoo commercial. Slide after slide passed in awkward silence. Stock photos of people doing yoga in boardrooms. Buzzwords floating over soft images of succulents and coffee mugs. No charts, no data. Just phrases like soul-first leadership and market optimism as a lifestyle. Then came the first mistake. "Huge shout out to Tommy in data analytics," she said with a dazzling smile, "for crushing the last Keepy update." Keepy. She meant KPI, and Tommy had quit 5 weeks ago. No one corrected her. They just opened job boards in a second tab. She continued without skipping a beat, introducing what she called the brand energy pyramid, a slide that featured triangles labeled with things like trust vibes, empowerment juice, and engagement bliss. She clicked to the next slide and announced a new tagline for the company. Money with meaning. One person in HR actually gasped. Legal would have flagged it instantly if they had been consulted. They were not. Sienna waved off concerns with phrases like, "We are leading with light and investors want more than numbers. They want narrative." About 20 minutes in, she unveiled the new logo, a lowercase z in lavender with a small heart in the corner. Designed, according to her, by a brand empathy consultant she found on TikTok. "It is minimalist but emotional," she explained. "We want people to feel like they are entering a safe space, not just a spreadsheet." Several employees began texting each other privately. One message that was later forwarded to me simply read, "Is this satire?" The meeting dragged on for nearly an hour. At one point, she invited the team to drop their current emotional frequency in the chat. No one did. Toward the end, she stumbled through an attempt to summarize the new growth strategy, calling it soft scaling through intentional resonance. Whatever that meant. Then with a final cheerful grin, she said, "Let's all breathe in abundance and exhale resistance." And just like that, she ended the meeting. No financial targets, no quarterly goals, no operational directives, just lavender logos, misquotes, and a lot of pastel energy. Afterward, the real meeting happened, in whispered chats, hallway glances, and texts sent from bathroom stalls. What just happened? Are we still a finance company? How long do you think she lasts? Some teams started downloading old versions of reports, unsure if they would be scrubbed. Others quietly reached out to clients to reassure them, just in case. The tech team took bets on how long before she broke the server permissions. The finance group began archiving files under a new naming convention, just to avoid confusion. Everyone knew what was happening. No one said it out loud. Not yet. Back at my apartment, I got a message from Theo, my old assistant. Just a screenshot of the brand energy pyramid with no caption. I laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. This was not leadership. This was branding theater, and the curtain was starting to shake. They had handed the wheel to someone who thought culture was a Canva template. And now they were heading straight for a cliff, smiling the whole way down. By the end of Sienna's second week, the cracks were no longer just showing, they were spreading. People were walking on eggshells, wondering what new idea was going to disrupt their workflows, or worse, cost them their jobs. That Monday, I got a text from May Bellamy, our compliance lead, or I should say former compliance lead. She had been fired that morning for being, according to Sienna, too negative. What May actually did was raise a concern, specifically that it was not legal to list projected Q3 growth figures without finalized data to back them up. May had been with the company for 11 years. She knew the rules inside and out. She had protected us from 3 separate regulatory investigations and saved our reputation more than once. But none of that mattered. Sienna wanted to move fast and make energy-based decisions, and May's logic did not align with her aura. Sienna's solution was as bold as it was reckless. She opened Canva. Not Excel, not Power BI, not even the shared network drive where we stored investor documents. No, Canva. And into a lavender-themed presentation, she dragged and dropped bar graphs with no scales, no sources, and no actual data behind them. The titles were things like Growth Momentum, Future Feeling Forecast, and my personal favorite, Revenue is a Feeling. She threw in animations, floating dollar signs, and a background loop of candlelight. The entire deck looked like a vision board for someone trying to manifest a luxury startup. That might work on Instagram. It does not work on investors who write 7-figure checks. Around noon that day, I got an email from someone still in finance. No message in the body, just the subject line. Have you ever seen this much nonsense in one spreadsheet? Attached was a PDF of the investor deck Sienna had planned to use for the upcoming shareholder sync. I opened it, scanned the first few pages, and laughed so hard I nearly spilled my iced coffee. I was sitting on my balcony, watching the clouds roll in over the lake, and there I was, laughing at a quarterly report that looked like it belonged in a middle school art contest. One of the slides had the words, Financial Flow Trust Glow written in bubble letters. She had taken years of meticulous forecasting, strategic trend mapping, and compliance-safe presentation formatting, and replaced it with pastel gradients and inspirational slogans. And she sent it out to be reviewed by some of the sharpest, most serious investors in the industry. I could only imagine the looks on their faces when they saw charts with no axes, pie graphs made out of emojis, and phrases like Q3 is just a mindset floating above cartoon clouds. The worst part was that she truly believed it would work. She thought confidence in Canva could mask the absence of structure. She thought aesthetic was the same thing as intelligence. By Wednesday, whispers were growing louder. One of my old teammates texted me late that night and said Sienna had tried to redirect client expense reporting to a placeholder fund labeled Innovation Pot. When asked what that meant, she reportedly said, "It is where we put stuff we are still spiritually figuring out." I had to read that message twice to believe it. I had invented the placeholder name Innovation Pot years ago during a board dinner as a joke. It was never a real fund, just a name I used to explain away minor reimbursement lags when someone needed an answer fast. Now Sienna was trying to use it in real reporting. That same teammate followed up with a second message. She has no idea how close we are to an audit. It read. I did not reply, not because I did not care, but because I knew my silence said more than any advice I could give. If they were going to let this ship sail off a cliff, I was not going to throw them a rope. I had already given them years of structure, of knowledge, of warnings. They ignored all of it in favor of buzzwords and aesthetics. Now they were trying to build a ladder out of hashtags and mood boards, and they were shocked that no one could climb it. The truth was, the system was already broken. They just had not realized yet how deep the damage went. But they would. The charts would not balance. The investors would start asking questions. And when no one could explain what revenue as a feeling actually meant, the quiet collapse would start getting loud. I did not need to raise my voice. I just needed to keep watching. By week 3, the cracks had turned into craters. Everything that had once been smooth, seamless, and predictable at Zenith Core had become disjointed chaos. Sienna was still smiling her way through it, wearing pastel blazers and giving pep talks that sounded like they had been pulled from a social media influencer's daily affirmation reel. But under that smile, the system was breaking down faster than anyone expected. The tipping point came during an investor sync call, the kind of meeting that used to be treated like a high-stakes courtroom session. Sienna treated it like a launch party. She had attempted to present Q3 forecasts using data she had cobbled together from the marketing team. Not actual numbers, not verified models, just consumer sentiment metrics, bounce rates from the website, and a list of top-performing Instagram posts. The investors stared in silence, blinking as she clicked through slides filled with mood words and glitter fonts. When she announced that the firm's financial essence was stronger than ever, someone interrupted her mid-sentence. "Where is Rachel?" one voice asked flatly. "Who is this child?" came another, half-muted but clear enough. "We're done here," a third investor said, and then logged off before Sienna could respond. The silence that followed was worse than any outburst. The kind of silence that means the money just walked out the door and is not coming back. Sienna tried to laugh it off, said something about generational disconnects. But she knew. Everyone did. The room went cold. Cameras flicked off one by one. No one wanted to be part of whatever was coming next. Back at home, I was sitting in my reading chair with my feet tucked under me, my leather binder still untouched on the side table, when my laptop pinged. A calendar invite. No subject, no sender, no location. Just a 15-minute block labeled coffee. But I knew exactly who it was. Only one person ever sent invites like that. Terrence Vale, the ghost shareholder. He never showed up on public documents, never attended board meetings. But every time something big was brewing, he appeared. And when Terrence wanted to talk, it was never about coffee. Terrence Vale was in his early 60s, quiet as a storm building over still water. He did not deal in small talk or fluff. He controlled more of the company than anyone realized, but he never spoke unless it mattered. I had only met with him twice before, once during the 2017 acquisition panic, and once when we lost a key partner during a merger. Each time, he said very little. Each time, change followed. We met at a coffee shop on the edge of the Riverwalk, the kind of place with chipped mugs, slow service, and an ancient espresso machine that wheezed like it was haunted. He was already seated when I arrived, his coat draped neatly over the back of the chair. No laptop, no phone on the table, just him, a folded newspaper, and a cup of black coffee. He looked up as I approached. "Rachel," he said, giving me the kind of nod that carried more weight than most people's speeches. "How is the view from outside?" I sat down across from him, clearer than I expected. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "They are losing control." I said nothing. "They thought leadership was a tone of voice," he continued. "They thought numbers could be replaced with slogans." I picked up my cup and nodded. "And they thought I could be replaced with Canva." He chuckled, soft and dry. "They're about to learn the difference." Then he leaned in slightly, resting both hands on the table. This is not just poor judgment. This is becoming a liability. Investors are calling each other, asking questions, getting nervous. I knew that tone. It was not warning, it was declaration. I am not asking you to come back, he said. I know you will not. I raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want, Terrence? Nothing, he said. Not yet, just wanted to know if you were still paying attention. I held his gaze, always. He nodded again, then stood up. That will be enough then. And just like that, he was gone. I sat there a moment longer, watching steam rise from my coffee, letting his words settle. The system was collapsing, and I did not have to lift a single finger. I just had to keep watching. Because when the people who make the real decisions start asking questions, the rest is just waiting for gravity to do its job. And gravity, I knew, always shows up on time. The cafe looked like it had not changed in 20 years. One of those corner spots that never bothered to update the paint or fix the light bulbs. The flickering ceiling fixture buzzed overhead like a tired insect, and the espresso machine made more noise than flavor. But Terrence had picked it, which meant it served a purpose. We were not there for ambiance or pastries. We were there to speak plainly, away from polished boardrooms and curated image control. When I walked in, he was already seated reading the newspaper like he had not been keeping digital tabs on the company's downfall for the past 3 weeks. He did not stand, just folded the paper neatly and looked up. Rachel, he said, like we were continuing a conversation from earlier that morning. I slid into the seat across from him. There were no pleasantries, no warm-up. He leaned in, his voice low and dry. They thought they could replace legacy with hashtags. I gave the smallest of nods. He was not wrong. Sienna had taken everything built on decades of trust, structure, and method, and dressed it up in buzzwords and fonts. She replaced meetings with reels, charts with vibes, and due diligence with energy alignment. And somehow they let her. Terrence sipped his coffee, grimaced slightly at the taste, then looked me square in the eye. I just want to know who still has the map. I took a moment before answering. Not many, not for long. He studied me, then said, "You are not coming back." It was not a question. I shook my head. No, that door closed the moment they handed my systems to someone who thinks ROI means ripple of inspiration. He gave a tired smile. But you still know where everything is. I smiled back. Yes, and I know what happens next. For a while, we just sat there. No rush. Outside, the world moved as if nothing inside this flickering cafe mattered. But it did, because Terrence was not just a ghost shareholder. He was the storm barometer, the one whose silence meant stability and whose questions meant collapse was close. If he was reaching out, the cracks had turned structural. He did not press me for details. He did not ask for the binder. He just wanted to know if I was still paying attention. And I was, not out of spite. Not because I wanted revenge, but because watching something you helped build fall apart is not something you can ignore, especially when the fall is led by someone who never knew what they were stepping on. That afternoon, I went home and pulled the binder from its place on the shelf. I had not touched it since the day I left. I had let it sit there, collecting no dust, just waiting. It felt heavier than I remembered. I opened it slowly, the spine creaking the way only leather does after years of use. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, color-coded tabs, scribbles in the margins, and sticky notes layered like geological history. Each section told a story: investor patterns, compliance timelines, crisis response trees, backup contact chains for when the primary system failed. No one else had this. No one else even knew it existed in full. It was not a secret. It was just invisible to people who never cared to look. Flipping through it felt like tracing the bones of something that was once alive, a structure made from instinct and experience, not automation. I saw the names of clients I had spoken to at night during family emergencies. I saw lists of preferences that had saved deals in the final hour. I saw initials next to timelines I built during a data breach that was never made public. It was all there, quiet, complete, undeniable. The company thought they had replaced me, but all they did was remove the only person who had ever truly understood the map. Sienna was not navigating, she was performing, and the people who mattered were starting to realize they were being led in circles. I closed the binder and set it back on the table. I did not need to act. Not yet. When the fire spreads, you do not rescue the arsonist. You wait for the smoke to clear and see who is still standing. Terrence would call again. Others would follow. I was not chasing the chaos. I was documenting it, because eventually someone would want the real story, and I was the only one who could tell it. It happened on a Thursday morning just after 9 o'clock. Most people were still settling in with their coffee, checking calendars, getting ready for what they thought would be another chaotic but manageable day. Then the company-wide email dropped. The subject line read, "Welcome to our new era," with no context, no preamble. Just an enthusiastic title followed by an embedded image of Sienna standing in front of a whiteboard covered in sticky notes and phrases like trust flow, brand as breath, and numbers are narrative. The email itself was styled like a party invitation. Balloon emojis, rainbow fonts, pastel gradients. But that was not the problem. The problem was what came next. 2 scrolls down beneath the decorative quote and an uncaptioned boomerang of Sienna sipping iced matcha sat a link. A live Google sheet, unprotected, no password, no restriction. Anyone with the link could access it. And inside that spreadsheet, buried among the tabs with names like investor mood, vision metrics, and glow projections, was a raw, unfiltered document that should never have seen daylight. Actual financials, line-by-line losses, missed targets, empty pipeline leads, inflated revenue estimates compared to actuals. One tab was literally labeled Investor Story versus Reality. It was an open wound wrapped in glitter and optimism, and it spread fast. Within 30 minutes, 2 major investors forwarded it to their legal teams. Within the hour, 3 funding groups pulled out of upcoming commitments. By noon, the spreadsheet had circulated in at least 4 portfolio Slack channels, each message more shocked than the last. One investor simply replied with, "Is this a prank?" Another wrote, "This is negligence, not transparency." And yet another forwarded it to their entire internal team with the subject line, "Unbelievable." Back at headquarters, panic moved faster than Wi-Fi. People were whispering in corridors, refreshing inboxes, and texting one another under their desks. Calls were being made behind closed doors. Questions were flying, but answers were scarce. Sienna, who had posted the email as part of her new Radical Clarity campaign, tried to spin it. She released a follow-up video in the internal chat saying, "Transparency is our currency now. We are owning our imperfections, stepping boldly into truth." But it was not bold, it was reckless, and the damage was already done. When the leadership team demanded to know how the document got published, Sienna blamed an intern, a name no one recognized, a person who, according to IT, did not even exist in the directory. She claimed the file was meant to be internal only and was still in draft form. Legal was called in. Compliance had already started drafting an apology. Marketing deleted the email from their system and issued a revised memo, but the original had already been shared, downloaded, and archived by every major stakeholder. You cannot pull back a leak once it floods the floor. I found out about it the way I find out most things these days, from a former colleague who still refuses to delete my number. They forwarded the email with a single message. They are spiraling. I opened the sheet, scanned it for exactly 20 seconds, then closed it. I did not need to read the whole thing. I had seen enough. It was everything I had warned them about. The numbers did not match. The language was misleading. The strategy was fictional. They had built a presentation around a story, not around substance, and now the story was unraveling. Sienna tried to hold a meeting that afternoon, called it an emergency brand clarity circle. Only 5 people showed up. 2 of them muted their microphones and left their cameras off. The others just nodded while she spoke about holding space for the pivot. No one believed her. The trust was gone, the numbers were out, and behind the curtain, everyone saw exactly how little foundation there was under all the slogans and sparkles. That night, a quiet memo circulated. From Terrence, short, plain text, no color, no flair. It said, effective immediately, all financial communication will be reviewed by compliance and investor relations before distribution. No exceptions. And under that, no signature, just a period. The spreadsheet leak was not just a mistake. It was the turning point. Investors were no longer annoyed. They were alarmed. Employees were no longer confused. They were scared. Sienna had taken a ship already drifting and ripped out the sails. And everyone still on board finally realized they were not sailing anywhere. They were sinking fast. By Friday morning, the panic had reached full velocity. Sienna's phone rang nonstop. One call after another. Investors, analysts, board members, reporters. Most went unanswered. But one of those numbers, buried in the flood of blinking notifications, was mine. She did not know it, of course. I was listed under a different name in more than one contact list. In some phones, I was still bridge operator. In others, legacy lead. It did not matter. The number rang. I watched it light up from my kitchen counter while I stirred my coffee, and I did not answer. Not once. Her final investor call happened later that day, the one she had tried to prepare for with last-minute notes and an improvised script. But it was too late. The spreadsheet leak had poisoned the well, and trust, once broken, is not easily restored. She opened the call with a shaky voice and no numbers. None. No revised projections, no verified figures, not even a chart. Just stammering and buzzwords. Words like momentum, alignment, and growth intention. One investor interrupted mid-sentence. "Bring Rachel back," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "Or bring us proof." There was a pause, long enough to feel like a shift in the atmosphere. Her response was barely a whisper. I do not know where anything is." Then came the tears, and after that, silence. No one said a word. The call ended with no farewell, just a click. An entire boardroom's worth of people disconnected at once, leaving her alone on a frozen screen with nothing but a blank spreadsheet and the echo of her own failure. It was not cruelty. It was consequence. Sienna had been handed a machine she did not know how to run. She replaced experience with branding, systems with slogans, and now the entire operation was sitting in free fall with no one at the controls. Meanwhile, I got a different kind of call. It came from a recruiter representing Apex Grid Solutions, one of our biggest competitors. The offer was clean and direct. Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth, double my previous salary, corner office, full autonomy, and a window that actually opened. I accepted the next morning without hesitation, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because they asked the right question. Not, "What can you do for us?" but "What did they lose when they let you go?" The following week, I took a longer lunch and walked past my old building. Nothing had changed. Same glass doors, same flicker in the entryway light. I saw a new receptionist at the front desk. She looked tired. The lobby plants were drooping just a little. I paused near the revolving door, not out of nostalgia, but out of habit. That was when my phone buzzed. The number flashed across the screen, still listed as emergency contact. They had never removed me from the system. After all that noise about moving forward, they had never updated the core. I let it ring, once, twice, then pressed mute. No voicemail, no text, just silence. The kind that follows when a building realizes it was built on a person, not a platform. That silence used to scare me, but not anymore, because I knew the difference now. Some storms you survive, others you become. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket, turned the corner, and kept walking. The air felt lighter. The city was busy around me, but I moved with ease. I was not carrying anything anymore. Not their mistakes, not their chaos, not their expectations. They had tried to replace substance with spectacle. They thought systems ran themselves. They believed legacy could be rebranded. But in the end, they learned the lesson the hard way. You cannot replace the foundation with confetti and call it progress. And when the smoke clears, the person who remembered where the exits are, the one who stayed quiet, kept their head and waited, well, that person is not just walking away. She is rising.